Welcome to Extremes of the Human Experience, where we explore ideas and people, good and bad, to discover who we are as human beings and who we can be. On this episode of Extremes of the Human Experience, we will be discussing a question that has interested me for quite some time. The question being, would you have been a Nazi if you had lived in Germany during World War II? I can't remember the first time this question was posed to me, but my initial answer, probably much like yours, was absolutely not. The comfortable answer is to simply think that Germany was populated by a disproportionately high number of sociopaths and apathetics. In fact, I'm sure I'm not the only one who has thought I would have occupied a completely opposite and extraordinary role during World War II. Perhaps that of an Oskar Schindler or an Irina Sendler. But let's think about the question anyway. Believe it or not, Germans leading up to and during World War II were not born anti-Semites. In fact, the German populace was not at all receptive to Hitler's initial pronouncements of the Jews as being the scourge of the world, and he did not speak about it as much as he would have liked to while the Nazis slowly began to accrue power in the Weimar Republic. The point is, anti-Semitism was not a word spoken by Hitler that was already on the lips of most Germans. Instead, it was a slow process of vilification that began only with passing, calculated mentions and progressed to full-blown genocide. As Hitler's plans of economic reconstruction and military expansion began to come to fruition, and as both the national pride and the economy began to return following Germany's humiliation in World War I, trust in Hitler's vision of the world grew. You can even picture the conversation at a German dinner table now. Sure, he makes a few off-color remarks about the Jews, but at least we're no longer burning our money in the fireplace to stay warm. It was by this slow process of normalization that the lives of European Jews began to become more and more jeopardized. I think of it like being a member of a cult. If Jim Jones took to approaching each person attending the People's Temple Church for the first time and offering for them to join his mass suicide the following week, he would have likely been the only person to have died in Jonestown. But he offered these people hope, an identity, and a feeling of community long before his depravity had come to surface. When it finally did, many members of his church had invested in and had gotten so much out of the church that it was easy to rationalize and explain away what would have sent a new recruit running for the police in a heartbeat. Jim Jones didn't create the Jonestown Massacre his first day at the pulpit. People had to believe in him first. When you're surrounded, too, by people who are beginning to rationalize or are simply not questioning at all, whether it be in Jonestown or Nazi Germany, it becomes that much more difficult. The point is, most human beings maintain the status quo, whatever it happens to be. While we like to think that we would have played the role of the extraordinary person during a turbulent time in history, the truth is, in order for one to be extraordinary, thousands have to be ordinary. In reality, it is really only through sheer luck that the status quo in most parts of the world today happen to view acts such as genocide as morally abhorrent. We are mostly, then, the beneficiaries of the progress made by our human culture, and not the product of some individual moral superiority. In a different time, or even just a different place today, we might be towing a very, very different line. This isn't to say that you'd likely be goose-stepping down the streets of Berlin in a silly uniform, though. To give you the benefit of the doubt, you'd likely be one of the people who spoke in hushed whispers behind closed doors about the evils of Nazism and then smiled and cheered at the next rally of the Third Reich. It's not your fault. You're human. So what's the point? Well, my reasons for making this video are twofold. The first is that, to poorly paraphrase a saying, the easiest people to con are the ones who don't think they can be conned. In other words, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And the lesson is this: Nazi Germany was not an anomaly of human nature, nor was its population any more depraved than any other. They were simply human beings who clung to a person who gave them hope when they were hopeless, and were willing to place blame where it was convenient. Once this ball begins rolling, human beings are capable of incredible acts of barbarity. Not to put too fine of a point on it, but you could have been a Nazi, so make sure you never become one. My second reason is, the next time you turn on the television to an atrocity and ask the question, how could people do such a thing? Remember, the answer is that because they're humans, and given a similar set of life experiences, most of us would probably act exactly the same way. Human beings are not so very different from person to person, and though circumstances will dictate who gets to play their ace and who has to fold, we're all playing with the same deck of cards. That's enough cheeriness from me today. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting or thought-provoking, like and subscribe.